In this week's episodes of the Irish History Boys, Tim and I discuss the split within unionism between William Craig and Ian Paisley in 1975. We discuss that Northern Ireland and British companies setting up factories in the Irish Free State to avoid customs from the mid-1920s, and very spicy language used by elements of the British press to keep the border status quo during the long Boundary Commission saga.
September the 11th, 1975, Irish News. All paramilitaries give full backing to William Craig. All loyalist paramilitary groups, except the UVF, give full backing last night to Vanguard leader Mr. William Craig. Mr. Craig, whose opposition to the Reverend Ian Paisley has caused major division in the Unionist coalition, attended a meeting of the paramilitaries' representative body, the Central Coordinating Committee. The committee unanimously supported Mr. Craig's policy that the politicians should continue talks to discover what areas of agreement exist. The meeting was attended by a representative of the Ulster Workers' Council, who are thought to be inclined to support Mr. Craig, but are still undecided. The UDA has confirmed its backing for Mr. Craig. They said politicians had a duty to seek areas of agreement. We believe that the only long-term solution is a plan to establish a parliamentary government in Northern Ireland with control over security. The UDA said that anyone who stood in the way of establishing that parliament would be betraying the people of Northern Ireland. The association thought that within a few days, a large number of people would have backed Mr. Craig.
Hello and welcome to the Irish History Boys with me, Cormac
And me, Tim McGarry. I thought I read that beautifully.
You did beautifully.
Apart
Yeah.
from the
But
stumble.
I don't want to take your words. Take your words out of your mouth.
No, apart from the stumble, which, but I think I got across the essence of the piece. Which
things weren't well in the UUC.
There were a lot of U's back in the 70s.
The United Ulster Unionist Council. Yeah.
United Ulster Unionist Council, the Ulster Workers' Council, the Triple UP. There were lots of U. But this is kind of fascinating. You think this is 1975. 1974, we had the power sharing executive under Sunningdale, which collapsed after the UWC strike. So what replaces? What happens in Northern Ireland? Who's running Northern Ireland? Well, it's been
knows?
It's been run by the UK Parliament. They have a Secretary of State who's presiding over everything. But the security situation is pretty dire. The IRA technically on ceasefire most of 75, but not really. Unionists or loyalist paramilitaries are out murdering people in large numbers.
They're really ramping it up in 75.
It's a grim year in terms of paramilitary violence. And politically, what's happening is that the British government said, "Okay, you don't want the power sharing executive that you had under Sunningdale because of you didn't like power sharing, you didn't like the Council of Ireland. What are you going to do?"
Yeah.
And they've set the parties. They've established this convention,
which people got elected to.
People got elected to. Yeah. So it was Unionists and the SDLP basically, and the Alliance Party. The Unionists then were split.
Well, the Unionists, there was loads. Like obviously there was Brian Faulkner as Unionist. There was DUP,
pro Sunningdale Unionists,
pro Sunningdale Ulster Unionist Party, and worryingly for everyone who wanted a solution, the anti-power sharing unions won a big majority. Yeah. Of the seats. So it basically, their results basically meant it wasn't going to augur well anyway.
And we talk, even sometimes people now still unionists talk about Sinn Féin, IRA, about the closeness of unionism to loyalist paramilitaries is laid bare here.
Oh yeah.
They literally called the shots during
the UDA and the Vanguard.
And the Vanguard and the DUP and the UDA and all of that are very, very close in the early 70s here. And here it is, paramilitaries giving full backing to Bill Craig. Because Craig was on the right of Paisley at one stage, wasn't he? He had his own organisation. Vanguard.
If you look at he was a minister in the Terence O'Neill's government, and he was actually a Home Affairs minister when it was all kicking off really, the troubles,
69,
and all the Civil Rights Act, and he was adamant that there was absolutely no need, there was no discrimination whatsoever in Northern Ireland. There was no need for any reforms.
Nope.
Would not back down on that at all. He said it was. It was all inflated, it was all exaggerated.
He made a famous speech at an Orange Hall, I think 69, saying that we will be masters in our own home and will not have any reforms and not be told to do whatever by anybody, whether the British government or anybody. There were no reforms required. Ulster was perfect.
And he was obviously totally opposed to direct rule. He wanted to start, and he actually at one stage wanted Northern Ireland to have its own kind of territory. within the encompass of being British, but independent to a large degree. He left the Ulster Unionist Party, and he set up the Vanguard Party around the time the direct rule comes in, around 72. And he very infamously said, that we will liquidate the enemy. And he used a lot of language about, we're not afraid to take, shoot people, take them down.
Oh, no. It was very inflammatory, and they held massive rallies, and Vanguard was seen as a big, with very, very heavy paramilitary overtones. We have the UDA started in 1973, I think they first emerged properly. So there were UDA, there were loyalist paramilitaries all over this, and Bill Craig was seen as the hard man, even more hardline than Paisley. Perversely.
He was.
But here we are in 1975, the convention is proposing some form of power sharing, and Bill Craig seems to be wobbling a little bit. Bill Craig eventually...
But I think he had been open to...
wobbling, sorry, I'm afraid. From
SDLP, he had been open to SDLP being involved in some form of government of an independent Ulster, whatever term you want to call it, beforehand. So this gets further crystallised, obviously, in 75, where I think Craig realises, look, if there is going to be a solution, to this mess we're all in, we have to contemplate power sharing. And that was an absolute no-no for the vast majority of unions.
The vast majority.
Led by Ian Paisley. Ian Paisley kind of, he led the ranks of saying, absolutely no way. We go trying Republicans.
Yeah.
And
well, that's it.
Republicans were SDLP
decided that, sorry, the UUC manifesto, the Treble UC manifesto, which was the anti-Sunningdale, anti-power sharing thing, they decided they could not think of Republicans taking part in any future cabinet in Northern Ireland. And by Republicans, presumably they mean any Catholic, they mean the SDLP, they mean anybody. Yeah. So power sharing was a no-no.
Yeah, they believe in majority rule, as in, they won majority seats, therefore they should rule.
Yeah.
So, but obviously, as many people have come to realise, you couldn't treat Northern Ireland as a normal functioning democratic society. And I think actually the Irish News actually talks about that as well, about you can't really, like, Britain has its problems. The political parties may disagree over many issues, but on the fundamentals.
Yes.
They agree. They agree in a functioning society. They agree in its parameters. We don't have that in the North. It's a divided community. Two different people who have opposing views of practically everything.
I mean, that's an argument even made today by the likes of the TUV. Say, how can you have Sinn Féin in government when they don't want the state to exist? Why are they going? They're not going to govern in the best interest of everybody here because they don't want the state to exist. But when you go back to 75, this argument is far more pointed because we have an effective civil war. It's not quite a civil war, but the violence has escalated on all sides. Yeah. It's a complete mess.
And they just lost their parliament. Like, they had a parliament for 50 years. So like now. If power sharing is easier to stomach now because they haven't had their own parliament in over 50 years at this stage. Yeah. So it's a lot easier to stomach alternative systems of government now. But back in 75, it's still very raw that the fact they lost their parliament. So they wanted it back, and it was a very. I know Seamus Mallon famously said that Good Friday Agreement was Sunningdale for slow learners, but could they have had the agreement, like, really realistically in 73? When it was so close after losing Stormont, to have power sharing, having a Council of Ireland, the unions were not ready to accept that in 73 or in 75. So as it's clear here, but obviously didn't have hardliners, William Craig, that are open to accepting it. So
the Bill Craig thing is interesting, and some people say he was played slightly by Paisley, and that he came out and said he was pro power sharing, and then Paisley went, well, I'm not, and did him up.
Do you think that was the case?
I'm not. I don't know enough detail about it, but that certainly has been suggested, shall we say? And I'm not suggesting that Paisley would be a good Christian man like Ian Paisley. Certainly would be
Machiavellian.
Would be Machiavellian of any shape, form, or description. But certainly Bill Craig did come out in favour of the convent and was done up and very quickly disappeared from the political scene. I remember there's footage of him. We did a show called Pop Goes Northern Ireland. There's footage of him trying to sell the convention things to very unconvinced orange men in a small orange hall. And his point was basically, look what we've all been through. What's the solution here? And nobody knows more than me, what we've been through, and we've all suffered from the troubles, we've all suffered the violence. But if we don't agree to this, what happens? And I think the problem from a nationalist perspective, you would go, oh, come on, of course, power sharing is obvious and all that, but you give fairly cogent reasons as to why unionists mightn't like power sharing.
Yeah.
But what they basically issue the report and basically say, we'd like majority rule again.
Yeah.
And you go, are you serious? Have you not read the papers for that? What do you mean you want majority? Nobody was going. The British government weren't going to give you a majority. Nobody was going to give you. But
that was interesting about
just madness.
It was interesting about the whole Sunningdale and this convention thing is that British governments and there have been changes in the British government. The Tories lost power in February '74.
Yeah.
So and it was consensus.
Labour,
It was consensus though amongst the British governments, whether it was Tory or Labour, that you weren't going back to the days of Stormont.
No.
And they and there was going to be some role of the Irish government as well to a degree. And obviously that was further crystallised and enhanced in the 80s with the Anglo-Irish Agreement, but. It's clear if any unions were understanding the reading in the room, what was going on in Britain, they would have known. Look, Stormont's gone. The days of us ruling the roost here are over. British governments, they're probably not going to. They're definitely not going to give national everything they want, and they're probably not going to leave. Even though there was a lot of rumours that the British want out, they're going to leave. They didn't, and they're still there. But they definitely needed some form of government that would be acceptable. To a degree to all communities, that was quite clear by '75, So that was from a long term point of view. That's very worrying for Ulster Unionists, of the old traditions that the days of the past are over.
Yeah, but there was some optimism up until, because we've talked about this previously in the Irish news. There was some optimism about the convention that they might finally come.
Yeah, there was, but it was I've read
unrealistic optimism.
I've read a lot of the Irish news editorials this time, and they were talking about giving the talks chance, and there may be an agreement. You just obviously we're looking at 15 years on, and we know what happened, but once the vote came in and there was such a decisive majority for anti-power sharing unionists, it was dead. And William Craig might have said, look, fair play to him for accepting power sharing a lot earlier than most other unionists did, but it was always likely that he was going to be hung out to dry, because the people of Northern Ireland, as in the people who voted for those parties, voted for them because they're anti-power sharing.
Yeah.
So were the political leaders actually going to all follow William Craig? It was unlikely. It just unlikely to happen.
But unionism was very divided. I mean, there were all sorts of confluences.
Brian Faulkner's unionists, there
were devolutionist unionists who wanted the Stormont back. There were some unionists who wanted complete integration with the rest of the UK.
Like Una Powell.
There were people flirting with independent Northern Ireland. There was a paramilitary group called Tara, run by a guy called William McGrath, who was involved in the Kincora scandal, who were a paramilitary group who were proposing...
Tara. That's a very Irish name, isn't it?
Well, it's a very interesting... We should do a proper episode. Look that up. Tara, Kincora scandal, William McGrath, shadowy paramilitary group. They never actually shot anybody, but were kind of on the fringes. And they were flirting with an independent Northern Ireland. There were quite a few people who were debating the fact, should Northern Ireland...
Enoch Powell, as you said, he wanted full integration.
Enoch Powell comes over at 75. Is it Enoch Powell?
74. October 74.
And says, basically, Northern Ireland, forget your Stormont and all of that. You're a full integrated part of the United Kingdom. Bob McCartney took up later as UK UP and all of that. But nobody really knows. In 75, you think, lads, you haven't agreed anything here, and you're just... I mean, and I think the sad thing about the convention is nothing's agreed, and then nothing really happens until... 83, the British government make another attempt under Jim Pryor with rolling devolution. Doesn't really go anywhere. Because of the impasse, they're eventually forced, the British government are forced to do something themselves and introduce the Anglo-Irish Agreement, which, surprise, surprise, unionists hate and are opposed to. So between 75 and 85, nothing really happens politically in terms of... Did the IRA campaign?
There's
nothing
active kind of attempts to get a solution, a political solution to the crisis.
There's a half-hearted rolling devolution under Jim Pryor and Thatcher, but it doesn't really go anywhere.
No, it's the
SDLP at this stage, you go, what's the point of this?
They go on spitting twice shy, and there's an element of that. And obviously in the background there's Sinn Féin start getting involved electorally pretty much from the early 80s, and then you have the kind of Hume Adams talks and on their hand, behind closed doors you're having the Irish government talking to Republicans, you have the British government talking to Republicans as well, and there are attempts on that are happening behind closed doors, plus the very public Humes Adams talks, and it starts developing then, from the late 80s, early 90s to the Downing Street Declaration, then on to the ceasefires and the ultimate Good Friday Agreement. But it's a long road. It's a long, messy road.
I think that the criticism, certainly of unionism and nationalism, certainly of unionism here is you've just created you're not getting majority rule. You've created a political vacuum. Who's going to fill that vacuum? Balance is going to fill it. If you have no alternative, if you're not telling people, here's how we're going to run Northern Ireland, you're not going to tell Catholics or Nationalists or Republicans, oh, by the way, you've a say and a share in this running of this place. Then what do you expect? And then just to say the same thing again and again, we want majority rule. Don't be ridiculous. It's not happening. It's not coming back.
And then William Craig, that's obviously David Trimble was a part of the vanguards. He would have been a lieutenant of William Craig, so he gains prominence in the Ulster Unionist Party in subsequent years. But William Craig is pretty much...
I think William Craig went back to be a lawyer. I think he went back to be a solicitor.
He died in mid-80s.
Well, unionists they throw people up every now and again.
He was aged mid-80s.
And unionism throws people up and then they kind of disappear again. You ever heard of Joel Patton?
Oh, yeah.
Spirit of Drumcree. Where is Joel Patton now? Somebody tell me where Joel Patton is. There was a guy who ran the Ulster clubs in 1985. God, what's his name? Can't remember. The anti-Anglo-Irish agreement movement.
That was pretty much all unionists,
there was a special movement and they kind of disappeared as well. So Bill Craig was a massive figure, late 60s, early 70s. Comes out in favour of the convention. Basically gets his arse kicked at the elections. Vanguard kind of disappears and melds into other unionist groups, and he goes back to being a lawyer. And David Trimble rejoins the Ulster Unionist Party. Takes a bit of time off to teach me Irish land law, so he does. He taught me.
Just you.
Well, there were other people in the class as well.
Order.
There were,
They don't count, though.
No, he taught me, while he's Irish landlord, he was quite good.
What was he like as a lecturer?
He was all right, actually. He wasn't the most exciting lecturer.
Dour. He's known as being a bit dour, was he?
He could be a bit, Well, Irish landlord can be a bit dour anyway. It's kind of attracts those type of people. But he was an all right lecturer. I have a bit of time for David Trimble, and David Trimble became good.
A very significant figure. I never warmed to him though. I always found him. I remember actually Ulster won the Heineken Cup in '99, and he said it's the greatest day since England won the Soccer World Cup in 1966. What? Why would you say something daft as that,
Well, he did say the old daft thing, but he
did. I remember him drunk really with Paisley like that. Was just red rag through a bull, It was but look, he was very courageous and obviously getting through the Good Friday Agreement. I'm sure he knew that it was going to spell political turmoil for the Ulster Unionist Party, and he did. He was very brave.
Presumably, having been through the experience of the convention of 1975 and seeing, that the lack of compromise just leads to what, and if 98 had collapsed, I'm not saying violence would have gone on and on and on forever, but if 98 had collapsed,
it would have been, it would have been. You'd imagine some dark periods afterwards if it didn't succeed. So look, we have to thank David Trimble for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Deserves a lot of credit. That's 1975.
Let's talk 25.
You want to talk more about customs and things and factories?
I find. The way you say that, like customs and things and factories.
Come
God,
on.
it sounds awful. This is from September the 10th, 1925.
Yes.
New Free State factories. The example of Players, Clarks, and Wills, three great English firms engaged in the tobacco industry, in setting up factories in the Free State, is having satisfactory results. Their success has suggested to others the advisability of following on similar lines. In pre-war days, Messrs Murray Limited, the well-known Belfast tobacco and cigarette manufacturers, did a large trade throughout Ireland. That trade was interrupted during the Civil War period and was also seriously affected by the boycott that for a time was put in operation. Then came the new customs duties, a still more serious obstacle. The firm, influenced no doubt by the success that has attended the enterprise of its English rivals, some time ago came to a decision to set up a factory in Dublin and thus cut out the customs duties on its manufacturers.
Oh, you see, this reminds me of
customs barriers.
Donald Trump. Tariffs.
Yeah,
Tariffs,
yeah,
he says, work. Tariffs says, I put on tariffs on foreign goods. Foreign companies go, I don't want to be paying that. I'll tell you what, I'll move my factory to America. This is small version 1925.
Yeah, yeah.
This is exactly the same thing. Customs barriers and tariffs, and certain firms go, well, okay, it's too much hassle to trade with us. Why don't we put the factory in the south of Ireland? And does it work? So Trump is right.
Oh, Trump is always right.
Trump is, yeah, well, this is 100 years later. He's got a point.
Tariffs ultimately don't work because the consumer ultimately pays. And even when you say you get rid of some factories, will set their own factory in a jurisdiction, others won't bother. It usually means consumers pay more because less choice, less options.
Right.
So ultimately they don't work. But I'll give an example. Like I'm co-writing a book at the moment on lemons pure sweets.
Lemons.
Do you remember lemon sweets? I don't know if were they big in
Lemons.
Lemons.
No.
They have there's still a brand called there's a big box of Santa Claus in a picture called Season's Greetings. Maybe it's more. Actually, the founder was Graham Lemon from Mount Norris in Armagh.
Like Lemon or 2M?
No, Lemon.
Oh, right,
like the fruit. Right. Yeah. But it was lemons were one of the most iconic brands in Ireland for decades. Right. There's actually a street off Grafton Street called Lemon Street,
right,
which was renamed while he was alive in his honour. But anyway, so I'm doing a book on them, and there was loads of confectionery companies. So in 1924, it's a year after customs barriers are brought in. The Free State government put duties on sugar,
right,
sugar-based goods. So it's actually great news for indigenous confectionery companies, and so companies like Lemon grow massively in the 20s, 30s because they're protected.
Right.
So that if you make your goods here, you don't pay duties.
Right.
So all the English companies who are doing a roaring business in Ireland, like Rowntree, like Macintosh, like Cadbury, Fry's, they all go right. We can't compete with that. We have to pay duties, and then add that to the consumer. They're not going to buy our products. So let's set up factories in the south, and they set up a huge amount of factories. So Cadbury's and Fry's amalgamated to be Fry Cadbury. Rowntree and Macintosh amalgamated to be Rowntree Macintosh. And there was Ernie from Tyrone. Did you ever hear of Ernie chocolates? Do you? Or
Ernie?
Yeah, Urney is a town in Tyrone, and the chocolate factory was named Ernie as well. It was
Urney is a town in Tyrone.
Yes, it's our village, but it was just over the border.
Wait a second, citation needed here. Jim Fitzpatrick is not here, but we have a man who's going to double check that. I like Tyrone. I've been to lots of gigs in Tyrone. I've never heard of Urney in my life.
Townland maybe, but it's definitely the factory was named Ernie. Urney after and it was a wife and husband Gallagher seems to recall it. They set it up, but so it was in Tyrone. There was a big fire, and they actually decided to go south of the border, set up in Tala in Dublin, massive factory. So all these confectionery companies were if they were based in Northern Ireland or Britain, were coming into the Free State. It was tobacco as well. Like Gallagher's had an issue. The Gallagher's, Benson Hedges and all that.
Oh, they're massive in Belfast.
Yeah. They had to decide what to do because there was duty on tobacco as well.
Right.
So Carroll's were in Dundalk. So they were losing business.
Carroll's they make major cigarettes.
Majors, yeah, and
20 major fleet.
And what was just Carroll's? Carroll's had their own brand Carroll's, the red ones,
brand, yeah. So does this mean the South economy is booming? Then?
No, it's not because it's
there's factories coming there.
But it's only certain small industries, like so. It's certain like the confectionery industry does well, tobacco does well, boots and shoes do well.
Right.
But most other industries are suffering because tariffs don't work. It contracts the economies generally. It gives you less choice to consumers. It doesn't lead to a vibrant economy. But
tariffs don't work.
But this was the prevailing.
I hope you're not hoping to travel to America anytime soon, my friend.
Yeah, I better not put that in any social media. or I'm not going to go to Cotswolds this weekend, in case I've criticised JD Vance. They were. But it did see a lot of companies move into the south to be able to do trade.
But the economic. The economy in the 1920s was awful down south. Well, they were kind of getting for money all the time, weren't they? And was that by their own fault?
Well, I think but again, the Britain fought an election in 23 over protection. So, it was a big issue, big political issue all over the world.
Yeah.
Should you have protection or should you have free trade? And it definitely seemed to be the prevailing mood up until the 30s generally was protection over free trade.
Yeah.
You know, that was the prevailing belief at the time for economics. And so, yeah, it benefited some small industries in Ireland, but most industries suffered, you know, because it's a small market. So you can only do so much. And the confectionery companies found this out, that, you know, it was great for you know, a couple of decades, but then they found out that, you know, small market, like, we need to export goods,
Yeah.
you know, and that was a problem. So, you know, you're like Lemons, for example, they realised that, you know, there's only so much of that pie you can get because it's limited. Whereas, you know, how are you going to expand? How are you going to grow?
Yeah.
You know, and that's when they started to export, and that was difficult. And ultimately, most of those companies went under after when the protection tariffs went. Like, so, but yeah, it was one way to circumnavigate customs duties was to build a factory.
Build a factory.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it did provide like players, John Players in I think South Circular Road. That was a massive employee. Ernie the chocolates.
Did we find
Did
out
find
if there is
out-
a place that's called Ernie?
Yeah,
There is.
Townland
Spell it.
and Civil Parish in County Tyrone, Northern Ireland, both near Strabane Lower.
Oh.
Also notable to be the birthplace of William Burke, notorious for Burke and Hare murders.
Oh,
Okay.
body
go.
snatchers.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So you are anyway, yeah.
There-
yeah.
well, thank you for that, Cormac. I did not know that. You
Well,
see,
there you go.
this
I'm here to educate.
This is like the BBC, except the money's crap. Educate, entertain, and inform.
Inform,
Ernie
exactly.
is where the birthplace
Yeah.
of Burke.
But they were a massive chocolate factory in
Right.
Ireland.
Right.
So again, this is where the partition comes in, the partitionist mindset. So you didn't, like Lemons, for example. Graham Lemon was born in Mount Norris,
Yeah.
grew up in Belfast, and then moved. He had a shop in Donegal Street,
Yeah.
Lemons Street, and then before moving to Dublin. But then when the Lemon family lose kind of control over the factory and the company, it's taken over by a guy called Thomas Tate. So I'm actually co-writing with his grandson, Alan
Right.
Tate, the book on Lemons. And Thomas Tate was from Belfast, so I think he comes down south just after the Easter Rising.
Right.
And he's and their main shop and their actual offices were on O'Connell Street or Sackville Street as it is then. Now they weren't burnt out by the Easter Rising, but they were looted.
Right.
The first few days of the Rising, a lot of the poor people in the
Yeah,
area
yeah.
looted everywhere.
Sackville Street and, all
And
the
sweet
little
shops
yeah.
were really popular.
Yes.
So yeah, they were looted and they had put in for a lot of damage and all of that. But anyway, Thomas Tate, he comes down. He's from Belfast. So, but I would have thought they would have had some business in the north, Lemon Sweets, like Season's Greetings box of sweets. No, they're not in the north. No?
I don't
Yeah,
remember
but,
them.
fair enough.
I don't remember them.
But they were massive in the south. You know,
Right.
a lot of people would know. They're even mentioning Ulysses. Arguably the most. Is it the most significant novel of the 20th century?
Ulysses.
Yeah.
You ever read it?
I have read it. Yeah,
Have you read
once,
it?
Yeah, very
Properly,
difficult to
all
read.
of it?
I read all of it, but
All of it?
a lot of it I was going, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
But there's lots of it going, I cannot believe a person can write like this. I can't believe. And I've heard novelists and great literary figures after reading Ulysses got depressed for ages because they knew no matter what they wrote, it would never come close to Ulysses.
Yeah.
Could never even dream of coming
Yeah.
anywhere as good as that. You know? There are passages you're reading and you're going,
Yeah, I don't
this is
read
not
it.
this is not a mere
It's hard
mortal
work.
writing this.
I've read Dubliners and
Dubliners
Portrait of an
is
Artist,
very accessible, a lot more
Portrait of
accessible.
an
Yeah,
Artist is-
yeah.
but I've struggled with Ulysses.
Well, Finnegan's Wake. I haven't tried Finnegan's Wake, which I
but
heard,
that's-
I
yeah,
heard
that's-
it's just.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But one of the opening one of the chapters, it opens with
Lemon Sweets.
at Lemon Sweet shop, the fumes of Graham Lemons, you know, and sucking red jujubes white, and it's a great passage actually about Graham Lemons. So and then he goes over, Leopold Bloom goes over the O'Connell Bridge, and he ends up having a gorgonzola cheese sandwich in Davy Burns. Just off Grafton Street, which was on Duke Street, which is right beside Lemon Street, you know. So kind of it starts off in Lemon's shop and
Right.
it ends up nearly in Lemon Street.
So what was
you
he?
know?
Was he trying to get sponsorship? Like was he?
No, he wasn't. Well, where was he living? And then he was in Paris, wasn't he, at the time? Or no, anyway, we're going on a tangent here.
Yeah.
But the Free State kind of customs barriers did give some opportunities to English companies. Now, obviously, it's a big, you know.
Yeah.
Investment, big capital investment to set up a factory, you know. But that's what they did,
Yeah.
and it worked for the Cadbury's. It worked for, you know, They're
And it
huge,
provided jobs, and I'm sure
provided
much
loads of
needed.
jobs. Provided loads of jobs, yeah. So it was good for those industries, but a lot of other jobs were lost because of barriers, you know. And ultimately, the consumer paid because there was less options, less choice for available.
But I mean, economically, Ireland was still exporting people for decades and decades, 20s, 30s economic war, we should probably talk about at some stage. But economically, Ireland was always on the back foot, shall we say, at the very least.
Yeah. But you take say this case with confectionery, that it benefited indigenous companies, but those indigenous companies couldn't export either, you know, because there's always reciprocal tariffs. So they had difficulties exporting. So you do get jobs coming in through factories being created, but those indigenous companies can't export their products to other countries because of duties as well. So what you take, you give as well, you know. So.
And you're listening to the Irish History Boys with me, Tim McGarry, and Dr. Cormac Moore, the podcast where we explore Irish history inspired by what was reported 150 years ago. 150 years, not 150 years ago, 100 years ago, and 50 years ago in the pages of the Irish News. And you can get in touch anytime on WhatsApp or email. Let us know if you have any questions. Send us a WhatsApp message or voice note to +44 7483 313 842. Drop us an email. Ask us a question. Ask us a hard question. Anything you want. irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. We're going to talk at the end of this show about a favourite topic of yours.
What would that be?
The right-wing press in England.
The
Spectator. Wild incitements. English publicist reckless incendiary writing. This is an article published by the Irish News highlighting some of the incendiary language used by the British press at the time. This is 1925. To prevent the Irish Boundary Commission from reaching a decision that would not be accepted by the Northern Government. In other words, the right-wing press are still slightly worried. This is September time. The report's due out very soon. In the next couple of months.
Nobody knows this really yet.
Right, but they've finished.
Except Joseph R. Fisher was telling all those Unionists. Yeah,
they've finished their deliberations.
Yeah.
People are getting a bit nervous, and the right-wing press in England, who are very pro-unionist, very pro-unionist, are saying you better not decide anything that.
Well, we read somebody here. So the editor was Mr. John St. Lowe Strachey. And he goes, suppose the Cabinet is called on by the Free State to use physical force to carry out the majority decisions of the Boundary Commission. They must then decide either to treat those decisions as waste paper or to enforce them. Remember, however, that enforcement cannot be attained by local action. The only possible way will be to treat the Northern Province as in rebellion, pour 250,000 troops into it via Belfast, and if resistance to such landings are made, lay Belfast and its shipyards in ashes by a naval bombard. Unless the British government is to do that very dangerous thing, issue orders and do nothing when they are disobeyed, hard and rapid blows are the only way. Once again, the only solution is agreement by consent before the publication of the decisions of the Commission are promulgated.
Right.
Yeah. So literally, he's basically talking about the British government and British Army just tearing Belfast apart because the Northern government won't accept the Boundary Commission's decision. Like that is like racy language for anyone, like at any juncture, isn't it? It's it's pie in the sky stuff as well.
It is pie in the sky stuff, particularly when we know the outcome. But also,
even then, leading up to that, there weren't many people saying that kind of thing.
Well, it's a hangover from the days of the Home Rule crisis, when the Tories were
mutiny,
very, very pro-unionist and used outrageous language, even at the top of the very parliament, the very top of the Tory party boner laws, and there are no links to which Ulster will go, which I will not support them, and there are greater things than parliamentary democracy or parliamentary majorities and things like that, basically undermining democracy, supporting the Curragh mutiny, Curragh incident and stuff like that. The whole of the British establishment, army everywhere, the press, parliament was very, very pro-unionist. And that's still, so this is a hangover. This is only 10, 12 years later. That's still a hangover from that.
It is, and as I mentioned in my book, The Root of All Evil on the Boundary Commission, that kind of 1924 when it becomes a big political issue in Britain again, because there's been stalling on convening of the Boundary Commission. It has to convene, but the Northern Ireland government are resisting any attempts for it to convene. They're opposing it, they're obstructing it, and they're getting the British press on side, and they're getting British politicians on side as well. So by the end of 24, they've put it into the mindset of everyone pretty much in Britain that if there is going to be any changes to the border, it can only be tiny changes, small rectifications, because that was what was agreed in the treaty. Now, the Irish are saying the complete opposite. We would not have signed the treaty unless it meant huge changes. But obviously the two main signatories from the Irish side were dead, Michael Collins and Arthur Griffith. So it was and most of the British signatories were still alive, and they were promulgating this lie that it was only trifling changes. We wouldn't have agreed to it. It was only small rectifications of the border. It wasn't going to diminish Northern Ireland's territory in any way.
Yeah.
So that was the kind of thinking. So this is 25, and I think most people knew certainly within government circles that it was probably going to be small rectifications to the border, but they didn't know because other than Joseph R. Fisher telling Ulster Unions what was going on. Like Feetham wasn't saying anything. The chairperson, Richard Feetham, and O'McNeill didn't tell anyone, including
the Irish representative told nobody,
including his Free State cabinet colleagues. So maybe there was a bit of we're in a bit of the dark here. What's going to happen? Why if Newry or Derry or big chunks of Tyrone Fermanagh were given to the south, and it was going to be resisted by the northern government.
Yeah.
How do you enforce it?
Well, and this article is saying you the only way to enforce it would be through
bombard Belfast.
Well, it's basically saying that the Free State could invade. Even if force is successfully invoked by the Free State, the triumph will only be temporary if the North were to be beaten in the field. They would never cease their efforts to get the Imperial Parliament to repeal the acts under which force was employed to hold them down. They would, in a word, offer and maintain a passive resistance, which must be the ruin of Ireland. So basically they're saying, the Free State, come on if you think you're hard enough. Come on, we'll fight you. And if you think, and the British government, come on, if you're going to enforce this, you're going to have to lay waste all of Ulster, because Ulster will fight and Ulster will be right. Which was that Randolph Churchill?
That was Randolph Churchill.
I got that right.
Yeah, Winston's dad.
Yeah, Winston's dad.
But yeah, it was.
I mean, it seems hysterical in terms of.
But even the Free State and British governments met around the similar time frame because under the treaty there was no kind of gap between the decision of the Boundary Commission, the ward, and the time when it was going to be implemented.
So the Boundary Commission, on the 1st of December says, here's the awards, and on the 2nd of December, if Tyrone and Fermanagh had been going to the south of Ireland, on the 2nd of December, Tyrone and Fermanagh would be in the south of Ireland.
Yeah. There was no actually time frame or kind of time gap provided.
That wasn't provided for in any shape, form or description.
So they were discussing that, should we do something, have a gap. And what happens? So what happens in where transfer territory? What happens in those cases?
Yeah.
So I'm confident.
Did they come to an agreement then? Did they?
No,
but the north and the south were going gibbers.
The talks were ongoing. So there was going to be more talks right up until November. But then Owen McNeill resigns from the commission, and I think Cosgrave rushes over to London and get the boundary report commission report shelved, and. So it kind of events overtake things, but there were still ongoing discussions as to what happens with transfer territory, time frame, what happens to individual departments. So after the first talks with, and I remember Kevin O'Higgins, he was the vice president of the Executive Council of Free State. He said, well, what needs to happen is, say for example, you've got an area in the north, you transfer to the south. The specials who were based in those areas, they have guns, whereas the Gardaí do not have guns.
Right.
So what he was suggesting was they have to be taken off them by either the Northern government or the British government.
Right.
You couldn't have a situation of them come south with their weapons and then have them be taken off.
So Fermanagh, say for instance, because it was a big. Fermanagh was transferred to the south. There were a lot of B specials, and or you could go. Oh right, we're in the south now, are we? Oh right, I see.
Oh, I have to give up my guns.
No, right, okay. That I could see that being tricky and problematic.
Yeah, exactly. So and then the Free State, the chief staff of the army at that stage. So he was asked what happens. So he had a few scenarios. So if it's accepted by the Northern government, but not by the locals who have transferred, like that is problematic, but we'll get over it because it's accepted by the Northern government. If it's accepted by all parties, that's easy. But the worst case scenario is if it's not accepted by the locals and not accepted by the Northern government.
Right.
He said, then we have war. This was written in around the same time frame. So so there was this kind of if there's a big chunk of territory that's going to have to go south, what happens? How do you enforce that? So now this is extreme language. Absolutely, it's extreme language. But
And this is the editor of the
the Spectator. But
yeah. A fine outstanding organ.
So it was in some ways
Described here
it's
as a pretty
hysterical.
die-hard organ.
Yeah. Well, it was, and I'm not suggesting it is now by any stretch at all.
No, it wouldn't.
So it doesn't have a people of Irish stock, isn't it? What's that
Did,
guy's name?
Boris Johnson used to write for it. There still does write. Does he editor at one stage?
I think he was editor. Yeah, he was editor of it. Actually, James Craig had an article in it the year before about how Northern Ireland was the same as Yorkshire and Lancashire.
Right.
Much as British as Yorkshire and Lancashire in the Spectator. So it was definitely inflammatory language. But there was concern. So what is going to happen? How do you enforce? How do you enforce this award? So obviously we never got to see that, because there obviously was meant to be territory moving both ways.
Yeah. Not much, but there was. No, there would have been significant.
There would have been. Yeah, there would have been, I think 40,000 acres. Maybe I can't remember the full figures now. What was involved?
What sort of numbers of people can we?
I think was it 30,000 going one way and about 7,000 the other way.
Oh, right, okay.
From what I remember.
30 going south and 7 going north.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I can't remember the figures now. But
he can't remember the figures, listeners. He wrote a book.
Exactly, I can't.
Buy the book. It's a very, very good book. The figures.
But he can't remember the figures. Actually, in the figures in the map, there's a map I provided in the book. It's a very well-known map of the actual award.
Yeah.
The figures in the map are wrong compared to the actual figures on the award report by the boundary commissioners. So even they got the figures wrong.
Right.
Whoever did the map, or whoever did I presume the guys who did the boundary commission report, Feedham and Fisher, their figures are accurate.
Right.
And the people who did the map
weren't
so accurate.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway,
so, you're forgiven then. We will forgive you this occasion.
Yeah, but this is its article from Spectator is an illustration though of the pressure that was on the boundary commissioners as well. That there was a lot of eyes on them, and there was a lot of interested parties. And on the British side, they only wanted one outcome, or two outcomes. Sorry, one outcome was no change to the border, and second outcome was very tiny changes. So that has to be borne into the context of what the pressure that boundary commissioners were under to do.
But so what seems extraordinary in hindsight is that pressure doesn't appear to have bothered Owen McNeill in any shape or form. He hasn't gone, Dad. Oh, by the way, there's a lot of pressure from the Brits. I better have a word with my cabinet and tell them what's coming down the line here, because by this stage he knows what's coming down the line, doesn't he? He knows.
What happened? This September 12th. This is a very interesting day, because September 11th was when Richard Feetham wrote his memorandum to Fisher and McNeill, outlining what the way the award should go. So he was going. It wasn't about North Monaghan needs to go to the north and so on. It was about the parameters. So basically, he said the wishes of inhabitants should be the primary criteria, but not the paramount one. Right. Land can go either way. Territory can go either way. We're going to rule out counties to be smaller units that we're going to look at. And that was kind of laying out the parameters of the way the war was going to go. So
in September.
This is 11th of September. He wrote that memorandum. So at that stage, McNeill would have got an idea of the way Feetham was thinking about the boundary. And it wasn't good news for nationalists, because all of the major decisions that or conclusions that Feetham came to were pro-unionist and anti-nationalist.
So was he not looking through the memorandum and going, there's something about Fermanagh? What's Tyrone doing? And what? Did you stick his hand up and go, what's going on here?
Well, he said he agreed to the award or didn't dissent to it because it would have created more controversy if he did that. It's very hard to agree with.
That's pretty weak, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty weak. Yeah. It just doesn't make sense at all. Yeah. It just doesn't.
Not weak. Wick. Wick is different. Wick,
okay.
Do you know the word wick?
No, I don't.
You never heard the word wick?
I've heard it, but I don't know what it means.
Wick means no good. Like Manchester United or something. Wick. They're wick. How they're playing, they're wick.
Is that a Northern term, is it?
Yeah, must be. Look, Ulster Scots or something. I'm probably.
You're probably an Ulster Scots now.
We could get a grant.
You could get that job of the Ulster Scots. We
could get a grant for
language
this.
representative. You don't have to be fluent in it.
We get a cross-border grant and an Ulster Scots grant. We keep this up. Cormac, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you very much for listening to the History Boys or watching. As I said, you can get in touch with us anytime. Please do send us questions, send us comments, comment on Cormac's lack of memory or his shirts, whatever you feel like, or ask us a question.
Or my knowledge of Northern lingo.
Or Northern lingo.
Is that Wick?
Wick. W-I-C-K. You're Wick. Not you are Wick. No, you're not Wick.
On that note, until next time.
See you next time.
See you next time.